Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Hannah Crepeau, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Certiport. We're so happy to have you join us for our second ESB Academy webinar. Today, our topic is public and private partnerships to promote entrepreneurship education, and we have two very special guests joining us, Chancellor Henry Mack and Margarita Bacigalupo. We're so privileged to have both of you here. And with that, I'll pass it over to Nick Haber, Program Manager for the ESB certification, to get us started.
Hi, so we're here with Henry Mack, who's the Senior Chancellor for the Florida Department of Education. Really excited to have you here. Thanks, Henry, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Henry, can you tell us a little bit about you and about your department?
Sure. So Florida Department of Education oversees all public education, starting as early as early learning all the way through public post-secondary colleges, typically called community colleges, although our state colleges offer four-year baccalaureate degrees. So everything under the Department of Education that is public education related is what we sort of have our hands in. This includes also career and technical education, things like registered apprenticeship. We are the state registered apprenticeship agency, as well as adult education. And in particular, vocational rehabilitation and blind services, serving about 60,000 Floridians who have intellectual or visual disabilities, reach as higher levels or as highest levels as possible of economic independence. Our university system is somewhat separate, but we work very closely with them as well.
And I know you're doing a lot with entrepreneurship education and training. So why is entrepreneurship education and training important to Florida?
Sure. We know that the future of work requires not just advanced technical training or skills, but those long-lasting durable skills or human skills, skills that I think quite often, if not always, are taught in and throughout entrepreneurship-related coursework or activity. So entrepreneurship education is a neat way to embed those durable skills. Skills, again, that are required for the future of Florida's economy and really the nation's economy. So principally, it's about that. It's about how to embed in an innovative and an exciting way these durable skills across all workforce education and training programs. The Department of Education oversees about 1.2 million students annually enrolled in career and technical and workforce education and training programs. Again, starting as early as the 5th grade, all the way through public post-secondary state colleges. And entrepreneurship education matters for that reason, to ensure that they're graduating well-rounded with those kind of durable or employability skills. The other reason why entrepreneurship education is important to the state of Florida is that we do want to encourage small business incubation. Small businesses really are the lifeblood of the Florida economy. And to think that we would not want to focus on helping students innovate and accelerate their idea, which could have long-lasting impact on a local economy and the people around them, would be mistaken. We want to emphasize that kind of training. And thanks to your partnership and partnership with you and Intuit and everyone else, we're well on our way to doing that.
Great, and you're thinking about an entrepreneurial yourself, which is great. And when you think about it, who benefits? Who are the stakeholders in the entrepreneurship education and training programs that you have in Florida?
Well, certainly the students, and that's probably obvious. And back to my prior point, that the cultivation of those employability skills matters, but also we want to help them start their own businesses. The other beneficiaries that we've been seeing as a result of our efforts here in Florida are the faculty themselves, who a lot of them have, quote, side hustles and have appreciated becoming certified and engaged in entrepreneurship related training, not just to help their business that they do in addition to teaching, which is great, But now they're bringing their business and their ideas into the classroom to help the students incubate and accelerate their ideas. And so it's becoming really a neat ecosystem of entrepreneurial sort of ways of thinking and acting, not only in terms of conceptual mindsets and habits, but practically students helping with faculty businesses and faculty businesses helping with local economic needs and demands. It's again, a neat sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem that is being cultivated somewhat, unintentionally as a result of the efforts that are underway here in Florida. And so the last, I guess to your point, Nick, who benefits? Students, faculty, and then the community benefits greatly. And it's kind of neat to think about the return on investment from all of those lenses, right?
Absolutely. And I got the privilege to be a judge on an entrepreneurship competition in the Appalachian area run by our partners at EntreEd.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw all these great ideas for businesses, but so many of the ideas were about young people looking at problems in their community and solving them in a way that creates a sustainable business. So it was very exciting. And I think that is really the process that we like to see here. There's a lot of people talk about entrepreneurship in kind of these high-minded ways, these idealistic ways, but there's some real practical things that you're doing in Florida, that the state of Florida is doing. Can you talk a little bit about like what specifically you're doing to drive entrepreneurship education?
Sure. We are investing Perkins dollars, principally. Perkins, as we know, is the preeminent sort of federal investment annually that states get to help supplement a lot of the state efforts or local efforts around career and technical education training. It is a support. It is supplemental in that regard. And so to use Perkins dollars to support Perkins eligible programs and the students they're in, at least in terms of helping them think through their entrepreneurial sort of idea, but to cultivate those mindsets and those habits is a win-win for our Perkins plan. Again, the Perkins plan itself not only focuses on technical education, but to ensure that those students are prepared for a career and a job. And so we are using our Perkins dollars to funnel money down into Perkins eligible programs to help Perkins eligible students and faculty. And we're doing that principally through the form of an annual grant that we park in our reserve bucket. Those that are CTE administrators or connected to CTE at the state level understand the category that I'm talking about in terms of reserve funds. You get to allocate to districts up to a certain percent of your total award grants. And so we've decided to use that privilege to focus on scaling entrepreneurship education and training. And so these grants can come in the form of 100,000, 200,000, 50,000, high impact, medium impact, low impact grants to districts and to state colleges across the state to do pretty much everything they want or anything they want, at least as it relates to a Perkins eligible program. So faculty support, student support, or even, and here's the other practical thing we're doing, Nick, even paying for industry certifications. And thankfully here in Florida, and thanks to your partnership, we've been able to add the entrepreneurship and small business certification to what's here in Florida called the CAPE list. The Career and Professional Education Act uses state dollars to incentivize industry certification attainment. So for every certification earned, the state sends incentive money down into the district and into the colleges that can go to teachers. So teachers get a bonus, as well as programmatic support for every certification earned. So we added the small business entrepreneurship certification, as well as the design thinking certification to the CAPE list. And since we know funding drives behavior, that was critical if we were to scale. Now, hopefully at the end of the year, when we have the data, we'll see sort of the activity uptick. We don't have insight yet, and you might know a little bit more than me at the moment in terms of the number of certifications that are being attempted or earned in this regard. So those are the two practical things, right? State incentives, state support, combined with federal dollars, federal incentives that you get as a function of the state agency. When you marry those two up in sort of a strategic way, you have a lot of potential for scale and for growth. And we're now in our second, almost third year of doing this.
And the job of an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur is a career path. Do you think, what do you think about that, and about any kind of challenges with the existing frameworks that are out there in thinking of an entrepreneur as a career?
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't disagree with you. And what's possibly ripe for opportunity next is carving out a program of study that is more robust in teaching students how to think about being an entrepreneur as a career. Right now, we have the career clusters, and we have programs embedded in those career clusters, none of which are sort of identifiably entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship has sort of always been embedded or peppered or layered in throughout those other training programs. And so you might be right. It might be neat to think about a specific program of study that trains potential future business owners.
Great, thanks. And our audience today is made up of two groups. This is part of our National Entrepreneurship Week, and it's Federal Government Day. So we'll have a number of policymakers on here, folks that are really doing interesting work. Do you have any advice to them on how to bring more entrepreneurship into their programs?
Yeah, sure. I guess maybe two things. As with our governor here in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, it began day one when he started prioritizing career and workforce education as early as sixth grade. And so policymaking wise, thinking about policies that allows for CTE expansion at the K-12 level is critical if we're going to meet the kind of talent that we need. And in many states, possibly like Florida, here in Florida, we have more jobs looking for people than people looking for jobs. So we know we need to sort of better right size the talent supply side of the house to meet economic demand. And policy wise, you need to do that by investing in workforce education and training as early as K-12, right? But to our earlier point, you don't want to do that at the expense of the students' sort of long-term success. That is to say, teaching them those employability and durability skills. And we're seeing evidence in Florida that entrepreneurship education works to do that. So thinking about a policy that incentivizes entrepreneurship education and training at the K-12 level, in the way that Florida has done here with the CAPE Act, which comes out of our state education trust fund, dollars for every certification earned, that then uses those dollars as an incentive, either for teacher bonuses or for the program itself, is a great thing. And we are seeing wild success around it, right? The other policy sort of thought would be to think about, again, the alignment then between K-12 and post-secondary, since we know that a life beyond high school is still necessary and should still be encouraged. In other words, we don't want students leaving high school without a post-secondary certification or a post-secondary credential. That matters. That matters greatly for both aims around education for democratic citizenship and what it means to live freely in our society, but also in terms of their potential economic earnings and outcomes. And so how to structure the system in a way that sort of helps students seamlessly articulate into post-secondary, but yet still teaching them again and guiding them around entrepreneurship ideas and strategies, and incentivizing it again with performance funding might be a neat way. The last thing that I think we haven't addressed, Nick, and I don't know if it's a policy recommendation or not, is how to do a better job at being organized around the kind of capital that's out there, or the investment potential that many angel investors or funds that are out there already. How do we organize things in a way that makes it easy for students to see where potential capital is for their potential business, right? So we all know that it takes some money to start a business, not a lot. But I feel like some kind of policy lever or some kind of strategic sort of initiative to understand the resources that are available for students from an investment perspective. We know that there are many people out there looking to invest, and we haven't, I don't think, done a good job at sort of organizing it in a way that is sort of accessible to students, right? So that would be the last somewhat random thought.
Okay. And the other sort of segment of our audience are teachers. And we've got a lot of teachers, especially a lot of teachers that are teaching other Certiport programs, or maybe even ESB, and they're looking at this program thinking they may want to take it on, or they want to do a better job. Do you have any advice to the teachers who are looking to start into entrepreneurship education?
Yeah, to embrace it, and to not doubt the real potential behind it, both for yourself as a faculty member, but also for the students that you serve, right? There's a lot of richness and exciting things that can be learned from becoming certified or helping students become certified. Again, both for sort of yourself and possibly sparking that idea that you've always had in the back of your mind of doing, just never sort of knew how to do it. This teaches you how, right? We're getting in the weeds with respect to things like ideation and market validation, and confirming that your idea has traction in the market, and then setting up a viable business model and plan, and everything else that's involved to become successful. And, you know, as cliche as it sounds, to achieve the American dream. This is sort of the formal education in that. And so advice for faculty is to, again, don't doubt that, don't doubt your own capabilities, but then also realize how this entrepreneurship education and training sort of effort is great for student retention and success, since it really does sort of realize or help realize in students their own self-efficacy and their belief in themselves that they can succeed at whatever, right? And that's the most beautiful thing about it. And like I said at the beginning, our governor cares a lot about small business incubation and meeting the demands of, you know, the Florida's industries. But we care most about the students' own well-being and well-roundedness and their capacity to become successful. And this is just a great mechanism to do that, right?
Thank you. Really appreciate your time today. I'm going to give you just a little bit more time to take us out. Any final words that you want to share with our audience? Anything we didn't cover?
Yeah, looking forward to maybe thinking through some additional certifications, Nick, with you, and really trying to ever, you know, sort of reinvent and be more entrepreneurial with what we have. So I see no reason to stop where we've sort of currently stopped, even though where we are is a great achievement, both with the design thinking and the ESB certification. But maybe through this webinar and maybe through subsequent conversations, someone will have an idea about how to refine it or perfect it or grow it, or to help scale it in a way that we haven't thought about, you know, either through new modes of teaching, virtually or not, or new partnerships that have yet sort of to be realized. And so I think that's always the cool thing about this sort of work. So just wanted to sort of, I guess, close this out with an open invitation to, you know, let's thought partner more together.
Great. I appreciate that. We're always trying to iterate. We want to take an entrepreneurial approach to this program as well. So thank you so much, Henry Mack, Senior Chancellor, Florida DOE. And I'll set up that call right now to follow up on this.
That's great, Nick. Thanks to you, and thanks to Certiport, and thanks to everyone involved in entrepreneurship education and training. It's an exciting time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great. And we're back now with Margarita Bacigalupo, who's the science officer for the Joint Research Center in the European Commission, and was really the main person, the main driver behind the EntreComp framework. Margarita, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the work you've been doing?
Yes, thanks, Nick. Well, I'm a researcher at Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is the research arm of the European Commission. So what we do at the JRC is to support policymakers with evidence that is neutral from private interest, commercial interest, or national interest. So we are internal to the Commission to provide independent research to our policy colleagues. And in this case, I've worked on developing this entrepreneurship competence framework for lifelong learning in support to the implementation of the European Commission policy agenda on promoting entrepreneurship as a key competence for lifelong learning.
And tell us a little bit about what's the EntreComp framework. What's in it? How did you build it?
The EntreComp framework is a descriptive framework that provides a definition of entrepreneurship, which is very broad. So we actually say entrepreneurship is when you act upon opportunities and ideas to transform them into value for others. Value that can be commercial, but can be cultural, social, or you name it, any kind of value. So it's a very, very broad concept because we are looking at a definition that is lifelong, life-wide, and applies to all realms of life, not only employability or setting up a business. So the framework, consistent with this very broad definition, has 15 competencies that are clustered in 3 different areas. I named them. The first is ideas and opportunities. The second is resources, the resources that you have to mobilize to turn these opportunities idea into action, which is the name of the third area. Each area has 5 competencies, and each competence is further defined into thematic threads, which develop in 8 levels of proficiency. Developing meaning we have set learning outcome statement on 8 levels of proficiency, from very basic to advanced, from discovering the competence to really performing at an expert level that is able to drive innovation, transformation, and growth. And we have set these reference learning outcome statement that can be used to different purposes by different kind of actors, from policymakers to schools, from professor at the university or teacher in primary school. Each one will have to make an effort to adapt to the local context and to the specific language, but there is a common reference. Consider that we are 27 member states. So having a common reference framework is very useful for people to understand what we are talking about when we talk of something like entrepreneurship that can be understood in a very narrow way, like setting up a business that was not there before, or can be understood as this value creation.
And it was first published, was it 2016? Is that right? So that was concurrent when Certiport was doing our research to develop the entrepreneurship and small business certification. And so when that came out, we were halfway through our research and very thrilled to find that the research that we were doing aligned well with the EntreComp framework. So that was validation for us, and hopefully, you know, that's the work we're doing validates the work you do as well.
Can I comment on this? Is essential that you use the word alignment. The EntreComp is not a standard and will never be a standard. There is no one at the Commission that says what is compliant with EntreComp and what is not. So any kind of actor in the public sector, in the private sector, in the no-profit sector can use it as a reference to write their own certificate, their own training program is really like a dictionary. A dictionary doesn't dictate if someone writes a poem or an essay. And the same is the Entrecomp. Is a tool that is meant as a dictionary, as a reference for people to use it to obtain their goals and to advance on entrepreneurial learning. So it's I want to emphasize the word you use, being aligned. So you recognize yourself in this framework, and you are certifying competencies that can be described in the terms of Entrecomp, but we don't aim at all at standardizing what right. Entrepreneurship education is or should be, or anything of this style.
Exactly. So I specifically use the word alignment because I understood that request. Wanted to ask you, I mean, what was the driver for the European Commission to build an Entrepreneur framework in the first place?
Well, the policy driver, let's say the policy document that started the work we did was the 2006 Council recommendation on key competencies for lifelong learning. So at least 10 years before the Entrecomp was published, there was a recommendation from the Commission to member states saying we should shift towards competence-based education. And this competence-based education in the European Commission framing is made by 8 key competencies that range from literacy to foreign language, to STEM, to digital competencies, personal, social, and learning to learn competencies, entrepreneurial competencies. So the policy document that initiated everything was this one, although there was previous research that was really focused on, and policy action that was focused on promoting entrepreneurial learning to create a more fertile ground for new business to grow, but also to foster employability. But the policy document that is at the basis of our work is comes from the world of education and is linked to this broad approach to competence-based education. And with this transversality in mind, with competencies that apply not only to employability, but to all aspects of life, also active citizenship, for instance.
Margarita, I'm going to ask you a question that I get all the time. Aren't entrepreneurs born? What evidence is there that these are skills that can be taught and learned?
Well, there is plenty of evidence, and we have published preliminary research, and our oven study can give you all the details. But it depends how you define entrepreneurship. If you define it as a talent, then maybe people are born with a talent. But if you define it as a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and you are really able to describe these knowledge, skills, and attitudes, you also make it visible that these are they can be acquired, they can be learned, they can be practiced, they can be trained, they can be coached, they can be mentored, and can be developed. And actually the fact that we have a progression model and we have examples of progression makes it very clear that there is a progression that is learnable. Of course, no one is expected to become proficient at the 8th level of proficiency in the 15 competencies or 16 thematic threads that we have outlined. But it's clear that these competencies can be nurtured, and that education system can promote them, and also that is not only the formal education system that can teach these competencies, but they can be acquired in any setting. For instance, we have published a report called the Entrepreneurial Employee, in which we put a lot of emphasis on the fact that individuals in their management of their own career by selecting the projects they work, by pursuing value creation, they can engage in a self-determined, self-regulated learning pathway in which they develop these competencies. And if you have the framework, then someone can come in and besides or beyond the education system, come in and say, do you want to be certified? Provide evidence that you have acquired these competencies. And this becomes possible.
And we hear a lot about how entrepreneurship is important to business. You talked about earlier how it's across a wide range of places. Can you talk a little bit, not just business, but how are entrepreneurial competencies important in other aspects of our society?
Well, I'll talk about my own domain. Today's policy, I work for science for policy, so I work in the public administration. Public administrators are challenged by an enormous amount of requests, doing more with less, dealing with more complex situation, interacting at global level, being thorned by all sorts of challenges that are global. And it's very hard to think that a policymaker can make a difference without being entrepreneurial, which doesn't mean that they have to turn the public service into a money-making machine. So I'm really away from the idea of entrepreneurship as necessarily something that has to make it clear that there is a return on investment, monetary. So also to have a social return on investment, you have to have civil servants that are able to spot opportunities to create greater value for citizens, and that are able to mobilize the resources from the public, the private, and even the non-profit sector to jointly create greater value for citizens. So for me is really something that is not is even more important in the environment in which you wouldn't expect people to be entrepreneurial, because if you look in the world of startup, you expect startuppers to be entrepreneurial, but it's very important that the entire population of all learners are trained to become entrepreneurial and are offered the opportunity to act upon the ideas they have, so that no matter the job they do, no matter the activities they engage, they are able to think about creating value for themselves and for others.
Right, and that it's all about who are the stakeholders, understanding the needs of those stakeholders, and making sure you're addressing those needs, and finding those opportunities to do it. And improve it and iterate, and those are all the things that
in our in the framework, in the ideas and opportunity part, there is spotting opportunities, one of the competencies, and is actually looking into this. How do you uncover needs? How do you analyze the context in order to understand the challenge that you have to address in order to provide this value to the citizen, to your customer, to your beneficiaries, whoever is your target.
So when we post this, Hannah, let's try to make sure that we can provide links back to the EntreComp framework. And Margarita, if you could talk, we've got two segments of our audience today. If you could talk directly to the educators out there, what's your advice on a lot of educators who are coming to entrepreneurship new? They haven't taught entrepreneurship before, they're interested, or sometimes they're being told by their principals they need to start teaching this. What's your best advice for them?
Well, my best advice would be to think about their job in a different way. If they consider themselves as people who transmit knowledge, they should change their mindset and try to become a facilitator of learning experience. So the experience part is essential to the entrepreneurial learning pathway, because learners have to create value. They don't have to learn about entrepreneurship. They have to learn by doing entrepreneurship. So they have to think about designing learning intervention that create opportunities, experiences for learners to become more entrepreneurial and to develop these skills. Actually, we have published a playbook, very humbly we called it playbook, that is called the Entrecomp playbook, that provides some 9 principles and a series of methods, pedagogical methods that can be used, and they are very different. It can be effectuation, or it can be project-based learning. It can be lean startup approach or design thinking. It doesn't really matter, because every one of us has a set of tools that they can use to design this kind of learning experience. And then it has a lot of techniques that can be used to support the acquisition of the different competencies. So I think that any willing teacher can become an entrepreneurial teacher and can find resources out there to experiment. And also, if we pretend people to progress in becoming entrepreneurial, more and more entrepreneurial from basic to advanced, then we have to allow ourselves to do the same. So we start at the basic level, we start with a tiny attempt, and then we learn and become more proficient in creating this kind of learning experiences.
That's great. And when we built the ESB, that was our Certiport's first program that was not an IT certification. And we did that because we were listening to our teachers, our customers, who told us they wanted to teach these subjects. They wanted to be able to do this, but they were had limited capability of doing it because there was no industry recognized certification, and it didn't fit into the funding scaffolding that they had. So that was our driver, was really listening to our teachers, our customers, our stakeholders to build that. Do you know, could you comment on any, or do you know any really good examples of schools in the European Union that are teaching entrepreneurship that we could follow up and get some good examples of their work?
I think that a lot of research is being documented in Sweden. And actually, the research by Martin Lakius at Chalmers University provides really good evidence of what works in the classroom. I think he has published in Swedish and is being translated in Spanish, but I'm sure that soon the results of his research will be available in English as well. And then there are plenty of EU-funded projects, European Union-funded projects that are advancing on entrepreneurship education. I can think about Entrecomp Edu, which is focusing on teachers, or Entrecomp Europe, which has as a remit the one of creating community of practice in different member states, because it's essential. Entrepreneurship education doesn't stay inside the wall of a classroom, not in the formal education system, nor within a company in which there is a training program that is aimed at training people in becoming intrapreneurs. So it has to break the walls of the classroom, of the training room, and go into the ecosystem. So it's Entrecomp Europe is creating, giving visibility to this ecosystem. And also the importance of having a framework like Entrecomp is that it provides a common language for people that operate within the education and training system, and people that are part of the industry or the government at local level, like national level. So when there is a common language, it's easier that these actors cooperate. So for me, projects like Entrecomp Europe can be inspiring because they really work at the ecosystem level. And then there is a large community of practice that is called Entrecomp 360, if I'm not wrong, and I think their website is entrecomp.com, in which anyone who is trying to promote entrepreneurship education and is using Entrecomp as a reference document can find like-minded people, a lot of resources. And what's interesting is that the project is European, but there is a growing community in Latin America that is being part of, is joining the community and is advancing within the community and providing input and growing the knowledge about Entrecomp and its use.
That's great, and we've seen that global interest in entrepreneurship education, and have localized the ESB certification into many languages. I think we're 13 or 14 now, so that's something that's available to those folks as well. The other segment of folks listening in today are policymakers, government policymakers, generally US policymakers. Do you have any advice to them? What we find here, we're very partisan in the United States, as you may have seen on the news. But one thing that seems like everybody agrees on is entrepreneurship and small business. It's something that it's understood as the engine of growth for jobs and for the economy. So there is a lot of agreement on that area. But do you, from your perspective, talking to this audience, what's your advice for those folks interested in driving more entrepreneurship in their states, across the country? And what's available to them?
Well, the first thing I would mention is try to break down the notion of entrepreneurship to the value creation part, and try to understand what makes sense at the level in which they operate in terms of value creation. I mean, there might be communities in which entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education is seen as a lever for social inclusion. In that case, maybe the focus of value creation has to be on community value creation rather than I don't know, technological value creation. And so instead of investing in digital entrepreneurship, maybe is social entrepreneurship that has to be the focus in that particular intervention. So for me, one advice would be to think about entrepreneurship as the capacity to turn ideas into value for others, and really unpack this notion of value and understand what makes sense in this specific context. The second one is to think in a systemic manner and to engage the ecosystem. So policymaker can operate at different level, but if I take a policymaker working on education, if he or she thinks that she can address the issue by only inserting a classroom or a subject in the curriculum, the impact of initiative would be limited. Maybe the right approach is to think about the ecosystem and to think about how to engage the private sector, how to engage the private sector or the local value creators, so businesses or social enterprises. So maybe you want to engage the local autism association that comes and brief the students to create something for their stakeholders or the family of their stakeholders. The important is to create opportunities to go out of the classroom if the policymaker is working on education. And so thinking about the relation at the ecosystem level, for me, is the second essential message.
Get out of the building. That's sort of the baseline for all entrepreneurs, whether you're in public policy or business. Great advice. Margarita Bacigalupo, it's been great to have you here. I'm going to give you the final word. Is there anything that you wish I'd asked you that you think would be important for our audiences today?
I think we touch upon it, the fact that no one is born entrepreneurial, but everyone can become more entrepreneurial, and this is an inspiring messaging for teachers who have to teach this not discipline, but this set of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, so that they have to trust that their learner can learn, but also that any operator, teachers themselves and policymakers, they can learn themselves to become more entrepreneurial and create greater value to their action. So it's not only the students that have to become more entrepreneurial. Each of us is challenged to have to spot ideas, to spot opportunities, generate ideas, mobilize the resources, and turn them into action to create value for students, for the community, for the local businesses, for the growth of their countries. So I think this is something that motivates myself in doing my job. I see that there is a potential to really empower people to create value and find meaning in creating value, because we don't live just to execute tasks or to earn a living, but we need some purpose. And I think being entrepreneurial gives you a lot of purpose.
It's a great way to finish it. I couldn't agree more. Really appreciate your time today, and look forward to staying in touch and continuing the conversation. And if anybody listening to this is interested in connecting with Margarita, can we share your contact information?
Yes, you can.
Great.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.